Right now is the most critical time for us to take back control of our food supply and become self-reliant by having our very own food forest. Transform your yard into a food forest and create a system of self-reliance that's easy and enjoyable with our friends at Food Forest Abundance. No matter where you're starting from, you can become more self-reliant. You can take your self-reliance to the next level by becoming a producer of your own food through growing and foraging. Learn how to turn your property into an income-producing source of economic self-reliance. If you're ready to go off-grid, click the link in the description and use coupon code FORBIDDEN for discounts on your very own food forest with Food Forest Abundance. Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Today my guest is Joe DeHoyos. First, a couple of announcements. We could use your help with the production of the documentary. We are completely self-funded, and anything is greatly appreciated. We have a supportfkn.com or PayPal link right in the description. Any donation of $5 or more through supportfkn.com, you're going to get access to Cory Hughes' secret JFK forum and tons of information that will and won't be going into his upcoming book. Anything, guys, is greatly appreciated, even chump change. Check out our website, forbiddenknowledge.news. It's the home of the Forbidden Knowledge Network. That's where you find some of your favorite podcasts from our community featured, Raised by Giants, Understanding Propaganda, What the Frick Live, Quantum Guide Show, and more. Forbidden Knowledge News is always available on Rokfin, Odyssey, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Our social media is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Rokfin is where you get our premium content, as well as all the premium content from every creator on Rokfin for only $10 a month. That's rokfin.com/FKN+, ROKFIN.com/FKN+, and all those links are right in the description. Today I want to welcome Joe DeHoyos. He's a Bigfoot researcher in Texas. He is also the host of Beyond the Woodline podcast. He has been researching Bigfoot since 2012 and has been interested in the strange and unknown since a very young age. He is also the executive director of the JRG Jevning Research Group, headed and founded by Will Jevning. Joe, welcome. How you doing?
Hey, man. How you doing, man? Thanks a lot for inviting me. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I'm doing great. It's great to have you. I've actually done a lot of Bigfoot shows lately, and for very good reason, though. It's fast becoming one of the most credible and probable phenomenon for me that I've been covering in the high strangeness realm. I'm 100% convinced that these beings exist, and not only that, they have incredible consciousness and other natural abilities that we don't quite understand yet. There's so many areas to get into this that I'd love to get your insights into, but this is your first time on. Tell us a little bit more about yourself and what led you to this research.
Yeah, man. I'm Joe. I live in Houston, Texas. All my life, I've really been interested in whether it's be paranormal, UFO, Bigfoot, other cryptids, all that good stuff, that we find ourselves in. And it's just always been a part of my life, really, since I was a little kid, actually. I remember even in elementary, I would check out like the only two books they had on the subjects. And I would check them out constantly and read them. And, once I got old enough to cut grass and earn some some money for myself, I would, go to the bookstore, have my mom or dad drive me up there and buy whatever books I could find. And at that time, most of the books, they weren't just about Bigfoots or just about paranormal. They had everything in that book, and so they even had, I remember they even had a chapter on spontaneous human combustion, and of course they had stuff, on just different like Loch Ness monster and just different cryptids and different phenomenon. But yeah, I've ever since I was a little kid, I was very interested in the subject. So uh, here a few years ago, I decided to go ahead and start my own podcast, and um, yeah, and just start doing that. And of course, I met Will Jevning, and Will Jevning, for those who don't know, he has his own show and he has his own group, which is a Jevning Research Group, and I'm a part of that group. And he helps me out a lot, gives me some great advice. He's been doing it for, man, well over 40 years. So in the book in the Bigfoot world. So yeah, he's helped me out a lot too.
Right on, man. Well, I love hearing about the myths and cryptids and creatures from each area of the United States. I of course we just recently talked about all the ones from Louisiana. What cryptids reside in Texas?
In Texas, for the most part, it's a Bigfoot state. There are dogmen in certain areas, like right between San Antonio and Austin. It seems to be a hot spot for dogmen. It's called the Texas Hill Country. I actually lived outside of San Antonio for a couple of years, and I lived right outside a little city called Converse. And I met a guy at my job where I was working. He had a Bigfoot shirt on, and I asked him about it one day. He was a young kid, and he told me him and his dad were both into the subject. And he's like, "Hey, we have our own cryptid here in Converse, and it was called the Converse Werewolf." So yeah, it was pretty cool. I guess a lot of regions and have their own little cryptid. And Texas, certainly we have our own here.
Right on. Now, you have also had some paranormal experiences besides your own Bigfoot research, right?
Right. Yeah. Um, Several years ago, another lifetime, I lived in a house, and we moved into this house, and uh, I wasn't even there a week, and I was laying there in the bed. It was on a Saturday morning, and I felt like someone sat down in the bed, and I thought it was my dog. I had a boxer. He weighed 75 pounds. He was a big dog. Um, I thought it was him sitting on the bed, so I kind of sat up and like, get your ass off the bed, but it wasn't him, of course. And he knew he wasn't allowed on the bed, so that's why I got up to get after him. But he wasn't on there. Then a couple of days later, the same thing happened again. I thought it was him again. I sat up and there was nobody there. And so I walked into the kitchen. My family, three of my kids were in there. And I said, "Hey, this house is haunted." And they were like, "Oh yeah, we know." Right away, it was like we weren't even there 2 weeks, and they were like, "Yeah, we know." And right away, they started telling about the stuff they experienced, from hearing footsteps to seeing shadows, seeing a bright light come out of my daughter's closet, like someone took a picture. Um, One day, I was sitting on the edge of the bed. I used to go in at 6 in the morning, so I was sitting on the edge of bed trying to wake myself up, and I just felt like someone poked me in the ribs. We've all been poked in the ribs. Somebody's poked us in the ribs before, messing around, and yeah, it was a clear poke in the rib, jab in the ribs. And I was like, what the heck? And I kind of turned around, and, there was nobody there, of course.
Oh, man.
Yeah, we would, of course, hear the footsteps. Faucets would come on, the shower, the kitchen sink. Now, the thing about the shower is that it was one of those big knobs. It was just like one big knob. You had to pull it out, and you could twist it right or left, for hot or cold water. So that shower would come on by itself. So someone could explain to me how that shower would get pulled out and, turn on. I'd love to hear that explanation.
Yeah, right on.
Well,
Well,
one day
Go ahead.
one day my daughter called me. Um, she's like, "Hey, I'm making some tacos, and if you want to come by and pick some up, come pick some up." I said, "Okay." So I drove by there and I stopped by, and her boyfriend at that time was there, and she's like, "Hey, we're telling him about some of the stuff that's going on in the house." And he doesn't believe in the paranormal. And I said, well, I'm telling you, stuff happens here in the house. And I started telling him about the the shower coming on, and I started telling him about the kitchen sink coming on too. And he was just there, kind of shaking his head in disbelief. He didn't believe in that stuff. And right on cue, the kitchen faucet comes on, just cranks on, and the water starts pouring out of the faucet. And he walks over there and he looks at it. He turns it off, and he's looking underneath the cabinets. He's looking around it. It was pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Yeah, did you guys ever look into like the history of the house to see if there's been any prior high strangeness or trauma or anything in there?
You know, that house it was built right after World War II, and it was the people that lived there. They died in their 90s. They were the only owners of this house, so we figured it was them. Um, it just seemed to make sense because nothing there was what I would call like an evil presence. Nothing there ever had ill intent. It felt very peaceful. Um, and I just think it was just them letting us know either that they were there or maybe they were just there in the house and we were in their way.
Yeah, yeah, right on. Well, let's get to some Bigfoot. Since you've started looking into Bigfoot phenomenon, has your understanding of what this creature is and how it operates, and if it is indeed, flesh and blood or paranormal, has this changed over the years?
As far as Bigfoot itself, my belief hasn't changed as far as what it is. I do believe it's a flesh and blood creature, but I've also come to believe that there are other things in the forest besides Bigfoot that maybe get lumped into the Bigfoot world, the category. I think there's a lot of paranormal, even supernatural stuff that happens, and it all gets blamed on Bigfoot. And just like the same with bears getting blamed for Bigfoot stuff. Oh, you saw a bear, you heard a bear, that was a bear. I think the same thing gets done with Bigfoot. This Bigfoot cloak, Bigfoot jump dimensions, and I'm not saying that anyone who saw what they saw didn't see it, because I've heard enough stories to realize at this point that people are seeing something out there that's that has supernatural abilities.
Mm.
So I would never call anyone a liar or tell anyone that that's not what you saw, because I think people are seeing these things out there.
Right. Well, what is your understanding of what Bigfoot is?
Well, like I said, I think it's a flesh and blood creature. I think it's a natural creature of this world.
Hmm.
What it is exactly, man, I go back and forth so much because sometimes it has, I guess you could say, human tendencies. Like maybe there's something a human element to it, and then sometimes it's more of a non-human primate uh, tendencies to these creatures. That a lot of what they do, their exhibits and their behaviors, other primates do that. Whether it's throwing rocks or having a complete fit. Um, their aggression, the whoops, the swing side to side. A lot of those are primate behaviors.
Now, have you heard of any accounts of people actually having sort of like psychic communication with these beings, or being able to kind of get feelings of either dread or being told messages to go away or things like that?
Yeah, really, a lot of people do report the feeling of dread. I think that in itself is probably more of an instinct for us. Um, just like other animals have instincts, I think we have instincts too. And so I think the feeling of dread is an instinct. But there are people that have had visions, if you want to call it, or even, uh, like you said, being told, go away or even come here.
Mm.
I've talked to plenty of people who have had that kind of stuff happen. Um, and I recently talked to a young lady, and she was on her four-wheeler, and she got a vision of the creature in her head, and she got a message, not so much in words, but in feelings of love, and also like disappointment, I guess you could say, like in the human race.
Hmm.
And then later on that night, she wound up seeing the creature. Uh, but yeah, she had previously she would have never thought that this would have happened to her.
So based on most of your research, you believe that this is some kind of either lost hominid, maybe lost Neanderthal, or wild man from our ancient past?
Yeah, I would feel comfortable saying that it's maybe not necessarily the missing link, but
Mm.
it's probably one of the missing links to our origins. You know, um, if it's not, we're definitely related. I guess you could say. You know, to the
Hmm.
creature. They're and that's probably part of the reason why there is such secrecy from the government about what this creature is.
Have you had any personal experiences or encounters with this?
I've never had any visuals, but a full-on visual. I've seen flashes of fur twice. One time, I was walking with a person down a trail, and she stopped me. It was like, "Hey, there's something over there." I just heard it snap, and I saw it move behind a tree. So when I looked up to the area where she was pointing, I saw like a flash of fur go from one tree to the next. It was like lightning quick, but it was like a reddish fur. And I said, "Yeah, yeah, there it goes right there." And I pointed, and she goes, "No, not there. It's over here." And she pointed more to the right. So me and my brother-in-law walked over there to go check out the area, and we came back. And we're like, "No, we didn't see anything," you know. And she said, "Well, whatever it was taller than you and Patrick because I couldn't even see you and Patrick because the brush was so tall." She said, "Like if you and Patrick were like this tall, this thing was way up here, you know." And it made sense because when I started looking at the brush, I realized that what I saw also was way above the brush.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, do we have much physical evidence besides just the footprints? Do we have samples of hair that has been found, or any type of, poop or anything like that that we can verify that is not necessarily human, or any animal that we can identify?
You know, a lot of the hair samples or even blood samples that have come back, all it says is like unknown species or unknown primate or something like that. You know, it never says this is a Bigfoot, you know, or this is a
Right.
Sasquatch, you know. Um, but yeah, for the most part, the biggest pieces of evidence that we have are footprints, you know, which nowadays is pretty hard to fake. Um, you know, back in the 60s and 70s, there were a lot of hoaxes, but now there's so many. I wouldn't say footprint experts, but there's definitely experts in the field of footprints and handprints, for that matter, who can tell you, hey, this is the real deal or this is fake. You know, and
Yeah.
just by the way the creature leaves the impression. But I also think audio is going to play a big factor in proving this creature because audio is something that you really can't fake
Mhm.
when it comes to decibel levels or the wavelengths of howls and screams and vocalizations. You know,
Now, with your research, have you been using some sort of audio technology to try and capture this?
yeah, for the most part, we use a couple of programs. One of them, Audacity. The other one, I can't remember what we use, and we use those to compare different vocals from what we think it might sound like. Like for example, we've got some hoots, and we were almost certain that they were owls, you know. But when we matched them up with the different owl species known in this area, we couldn't match them up. We couldn't find them, you know. And then I think networking also because I have sent vocals to other areas of the country, like, hey, have you guys heard this? Have you guys heard that? Sometimes you'll come back and people will say, yeah, this is what this is, or this is what it's not, or we've never heard that before either, you know. So I
Right.
think you've got a network and you've got a I think it keeps you honest, you know what I'm saying?
Now, earlier you said that you think it seems like some are highly intelligent and some are more along the lines of primate behavior. Many of the researchers that I've talked to lately, there's a kind of new trend going on where they're doing this thing called gifting and presenting things to the area that they believe that the Bigfoots reside in, like sticks or berries or food, whatever they want to try and present to the Bigfoot, and whatever's out there will actually reciprocate and bring them more food, or they even made effigies of the people that they were interacting with, supposedly with by sticks and rocks and things like that. Have you heard of anything like this?
You know, I've heard of the gifting. I don't know what to make of it because there are a lot of animals that do bring stuff to people's homes, houses. Um, Raccoons will bring stuff, rats will bring stuff, even crows will bring stuff. Um, Domestic animals will bring stuff, you know. So it's hard to say what percentage of that actually goes on and what percentage is actually real. Um, and as a matter of fact, I was thinking today about the stick figures that people say that they find or that they see. You know, I don't know what to make of that either. And again, you know, I'm not calling anyone a liar or debunking anyone's research. You know, I can't tell anyone what they experience and what they don't. But
Right.
I can tell you that what I do know, and that's that other animals will bring stuff back.
Now, through your research, have you interviewed eyewitnesses about their own personal experiences?
Yeah, yeah. I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to interview so many people. And real quick about the gifting, I
Hmm.
did talk to a gentleman. He was in the Bigfoot area, and he had a jar of peanut butter, and he stuck that peanut butter with the lid still on it out in the area. It was actually under a bridge where he had found several prints before, also. And a couple of days later, he comes back to the peanut butter, and he unscrews the top, and he looks, and there's just like one big giant finger scoop that was taken
Oh,
out of it. Yeah,
wow, that's
and
cool.
he said he compared it to his finger. He goes, my finger didn't even compare to it. So that's why I kind of say I am kind of on the fence about the gifting thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, I've been lucky enough to talk to people, especially here in Texas. There's a lot of encounters. I live right outside of the San Houston Forest, which is north of Houston, about 45 minutes an hour north of Houston. So I'm lucky to be here, and that's where I get a lot of the encounters from. And I met some great people with their encounters, and a lot of them are pretty terrifying. I've never heard of any encounter there involving any kind of the mind speak or the portal jumping or the cloaking, you know. And that's
Well,
why I say I'm on the fence with that stuff too, and
right.
because the reports that I've handled personally have all been flesh and blood and pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it's so interesting the various different types of reports you hear, even from different areas. Maybe you could tell us about some of the most profound ones that you've heard.
One of the most profound ones that I've heard was from a friend of mine. I met him 2 years ago, um, and over the past couple of years, we've become really good friends. His name is Walter, and um, Will Jevning actually called me up and told me, "Hey, there's a guy in your area. He had an encounter. Get in touch with him." So I called Walter up. We got in touch, and he was actually part of a paranormal team. They were, that went around doing paranormal investigations or what have you. And one night they decided to go out to the San Houston Forest to do some Bigfoot investigations. Somebody had heard on his team that there was a good area to go look for Bigfoot. So they went out there to go look. And while they were out there, they were parked down this old dirt road out in the middle of nowhere. This truck pulls up to them out of nowhere, and the guy gets out and is like, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" And they're like, "We're just out here messing around, looking around." He goes, "No, you guys are out here looking for Bigfoot." He goes, "Follow me. I'm gonna take you to him." So they follow the guy, and they go down even further down this road, and they get to the dead end. They get out. He says immediately when they get out, they start hearing these moans and these screams and getting stuff thrown at them. And Walter's like, "Somebody's out here messing with us." And Walter's a former Marine. He was in recon, and he was armed that night. He's like, "Someone's messing with us. So I'm gonna go out there and confront them." So he gets his pistol and sidearm, and he's walking down to the creek. And he sees one standing behind a tree. And he says when he's looking at it, he says it's so wide, it's sticking out of both sides of the tree. And he realizes that it's not a man. And he says it looks out at him 3 times, and the third time it actually steps out. And he says when it steps out, he just gives him a look like you need to get the hell out of here. So he
Yeah.
said he turns around and he walks off, and he said he was just waiting to die. He wasn't very far from it. We go to that location all the time actually, but we went to that location at first and checked everything out. And when he told me there was a white spot on the tree where the top of his head was at, which is a fungus, like a fungus that grows on a tree. And so we measured the height of that fungus. It was 9.5 feet tall.
Man.
Yeah. So he saw a big one.
That's incredible. And you said most of the encounters that you've heard were kind of a little bit on the scary side. Do you
Yeah,
think these things are naturally aggressive or just maybe protecting their territory?
I think a little bit of both. I think they the night that he went, they were probably out on a hunt, and they went in there and they probably interrupted their hunts, so they weren't probably, they probably pissed them off a little bit.
Hmm.
I think there's a lot of aggressive encounters because people just cross their paths at the wrong time, and it seems like down south you hear more aggressive encounters than you do up north. I don't, and that's something everyone says. Why that is, I don't know. Maybe it's the heat. I mean, you
Yeah.
know, um, but I think a lot of times these things are just protective and of their territory. They're probably getting messed with at the wrong time when they're on the hunt. Which they probably do late at night, early mornings.
Right. Now, I just did an interview a couple of days ago with a gentleman named Scott Pace. He's just a regular guy who had some profound Bigfoot experiences in South Louisiana, of all places. I grew up in South Louisiana. I didn't even realize Bigfoot was a thing down there, but apparently it is. He's got some, great pictures and everything. Nothing, profoundly clear, but very interesting. But his stories are the most compelling things. And he claims to have really kind of a close relationship with some of these beings. He claims that they have psychic communication and that they actually have had a dialogue. He's claimed to have witnessed these beings have a dialogue with a dogman. A, a psychic kind of thing. Now, have you had any dogman experiences or accounts that you've heard about?
I've never had any dogman experiences. I've gone to places or locations where they were said to be seen, but I've never had any kind of encounter at all. I've never seen any kind of evidence, but definitely talked to people who've had encounters with those creatures. Like I said, when I lived outside of San Antonio, it was called the Converse werewolf, and this was like from the 1890s, 1880s. A farmer has sent his son out to go hunt. His son comes back really early and is like, "Dad, there's a monster out in the woods or whatever." And the farmer's like, "No, you need to go out there and hunt. You're just being scared or whatever." And there's no such thing as monsters, basically.
Yeah.
So the next morning, the son doesn't come back. The farmer gets a couple of his neighbors together. Hey, let's go look for my son. They find his son. He's dead in the field, and there's what they describe as a werewolf, eating at his body. And the farmer and his friends take shots at it, but they never hit it because it just runs too fast. But that is something you can Google and look up, the Converse werewolf. It's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, man, that's terrifying. Have you any other accounts that you've heard of, or anyone that you've interviewed, either Dogman or another profound Bigfoot experience that you could tell us about?
I've heard people who have had dogman encounters in the Sam Houston forest. And like I said, I've never seen any evidence of that, but I'm sure they are there. And in the Davy Crockett, which is even further north of Houston, I talked to a guy. He was actually camping in the Davy Crockett, and uh, where he was camping, he was sticking his head out of the bushes, staring at him. You could only see its head. It was sticking his head out, and he didn't realize what he was looking at first until it stood up. He said once it stood up, he realized that it wasn't a regular, wolf or coyote. It was just way too big, even on all fours. And once it stood up, he was like almost 7 feet tall, 6.5, 7 feet tall. And he's like, it was time to go. He packed up what he could and got the hell out of there. Yeah,
Right
and
on,
he
man.
didn't stick around to see what it wanted.
I don't think I would have either.
Yeah.
Earlier in the episode, you were saying that you think a lot of what people are considering Bigfoot sightings may be other things, especially when it comes to the really strange paranormal stuff. What are some of the examples that you think people are getting confused?
One of the biggest is probably the footsteps. Oftentimes, people will report hearing footsteps, and they don't see anything. I think sometimes that may be paranormal. I'm not saying it all is, but I think a lot of times it very well could be. A lot of this, especially in that national forest, you have no idea what happened I don't know, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. There's probably still trauma in there, especially like um, a lot of forests were logged a long time ago. They had mines. Some of these places, even people that took up resident in the forest, uh, stuff that gets thrown at people, that could be paranormal also. Um, of course, hearing the voices, which I've heard mumbling in the voices before, in the forest before, uh, and now I wonder, man, was that a Bigfoot or was that just something paranormal? You
Mm.
know, um, because Bigfoot does do the chatter, the samurai chatter, which is what it's called. Um, but the stuff that I've heard, it sounded like people talking.
Wow. Now the samurai chatter, I've heard other researchers mention this. For the audience, could you describe basically what this is? It sounds like they're speaking a different language, even like a Japanese or something, right?
Right? Yeah, it sounds pretty close to Japanese. I believe it's. I don't want to say the wrong name, so I'm sorry if I get it wrong. But I think it's Ron Moorhead who has those recordings.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, of the samurai chatter. So one day I was walking down the trail. I was walking to the location where we get a lot of activity, and I heard what it sounded like a hog to my left, and I was like, I don't want to deal with these hogs. All I had was a 9 millimeter, which I suggest everyone go. If you're going to go hiking in the woods, you carry a pistol with you because not for Bigfoot, but for other animals.
Mm.
So I was like, I don't want to deal with hogs. So I got off the trail. I walked closer to the lake. And I kind of walked on the bank, I don't know, maybe 60, 40 yards or so. After a while, I walked back towards the trail. When I got back to the trail, I walked a little bit and I heard what I sounded like hogs again. It was like grunting or even snorting, I guess. So I got off the trail. I went through the woods, went to the lake, walked as far as I could before the lake actually turned into the forest, and I had no choice but to go back onto the trail. And as I'm walking on the trail, I hear a branch snap, and it was a loud snap, and I was like, "Oh shit!" What was that? And so I grabbed my gun, I pulled it out, and I racked around in the chamber. And when I did that, I heard roar, roar, roar. It's exactly what I heard. It was like roar, roar, roar. And I was like, oh shit, it didn't like that.
Oh man.
So I just stood there. I literally stood there, and didn't move for about 5 minutes. And I didn't know what to do. If I should go forward or get the hell out and go back, I was already about a mile into the woods at this point. But I just decided it was probably a good idea to go back. That's
Have
what
you
I
had
did.
any accounts of people actually being attacked or are fearful that they're going to be?
There have been a few people come up missing in the San Francisco forest. There's even been a few people got killed there uh, under strange circumstances. It was stuff that actually made the news and in the papers. There was a couple of hunters that were out in this one area, which is an area that we go and investigate, uh, which we didn't even know about until we heard that some hunters had come up missing in that area a few years prior to us even going to that area. We looked it up, and yeah, two hunters came up missing in that area, and it's a pretty active area, so it makes us kind of wonder what happened there. Um, there was also a young lady that was killed. She was found dead on the side of the road, which the road goes to the forest,
Hmm.
and they said it looked like there was a bear attack, so
Wow.
a
I
lot of
wonder
bears
how
out
much
here.
is of this is, if Bigfoot is attacking or if this could be that Dogman phenomenon. And if it
Yeah.
is the Dogman, is this paranormal? Is this something that is like a shapeshifter or just another lost creature that we just don't understand?
I've got so many thoughts on what the Dogman is or what it could be. I really do. It absolutely could be something, supernatural, just from the stories we've heard on different podcasts of people who run into this creature. Um, there are those who think that it's actually maybe more of a primate, but it just looks like a dog because of this, protruding snout, like kind of like a giant baboon. Baboons have the snouts, but it's a primate. Um, so that's a good possibility too. But what exactly a dogman is, or even if it's something that's evolving, you know, uh, some kind of canine that is actually evolving and becoming its own species. I've heard that too. So it's really hard to determine or to not determine, but to say what I think it is, because my mind changes on that all the time.
Right. Well, now we have a lot of researchers that are going to areas with concentrated paranormal and high strangeness activity, but not only independent researchers. We've got a lot of military and government interest in some of places like, Skinwalker Ranch, of course, but there are other places across the United States that have high interest in paranormal activity, and they're trying to quote unquote figure out what is going on, probably to weaponize it. There's also incredibly a high number of Bigfoot sightings. What do you think is going on there? There always seems to be high strangeness associated with Bigfoot oftentimes. What do you think is going on there?
That's a real good question. I get asked that all the time, and I used to think about that all the time. And I think one of the biggest answers are people talk about the ley lines. So it makes me wonder about that, or even if there's certain kind of not necessarily portals, but maybe just energies that attract all these strange phenomenon. I think that's a very good possibility. I think there's a lot of what goes on naturally that we just don't know about, and for whatever reason, it either attracts this kind of activity, or it's the source of this activity.
Yeah, and if Bigfoot isn't paranormal, it would probably just mean that Bigfoots are everywhere. They're in a lot more abundant than we would think, and they're just very elusive. I've heard of Bigfoot sightings not only in heavily wooded areas or mountains, but just rural types of areas that you wouldn't expect it.
Yeah, there's so like up north, like I said, is like an hour north of Houston. There's the San Luis Forest. Then you have a couple of smaller towns, which aren't necessarily small. I mean, thousands of people live there now, like, Conroe and Willis, and they're pretty populated, and there are still sightings of these creatures, not just like on the edge of town, but inside town, whether they're going through dumpsters or, peeking at people's windows or what have you. They're not totally a shy creature. I think they're very curious, um, and I don't think the population scares them off as much as people think they do.
It seems like there's more and more of these sightings, and I think it's possibly because we're becoming more populating more rural areas, and we have the internet and access to all this stuff. Do you think that's why we're actually seeing more of these?
Yeah, I think it's becoming more acceptable to talk about. We're used to you just didn't talk about this kind of stuff. You didn't talk about anything. If you saw a UFO, you had something paranormal, you didn't talk about it because you don't want people to think you're crazy. And it wasn't even so much that people think that you were crazy. It put like a bad mark on your whole family. So you didn't want to talk about that kind of stuff. But like I said, now I think it's becoming more acceptable, and with the internet, social media, there's more of an outlet. I like hearing older stories because I think it's important for people to get this off their chest. I talk to so many people who are like, "Man, I'm just so glad I told somebody who believes me."
Yeah.
People are so relieved, and that's what I tell people too. If you can't tell anyone who's going to think you're without them thinking you're crazy, man, get on Facebook. There's tons of groups out there. You can talk to someone and tell somebody your story, and I promise you'll be a lot more relieved once you tell them.
From what I've heard, there is interest in three-letter agencies and government groups have high interest in Bigfoot, especially for researchers that are going out into the woods at times. I've heard of some being harassed, some told not to come there, and there's been incredible Bigfoot accounts where these kind of men in black-like figures would show up, but not exactly the same, immediately after the sighting and kind of dismiss everything. Is this something that you've ever run into or heard of?
I've actually heard about it quite a bit. People that I've talked to have told me they've received phone calls to shut the f up, basically. You know, and yeah, I won't talk too much about that because I don't want no one shutting down my show. But
Right,
yeah,
right, yeah.
I've definitely heard people tell me that. People personally to my face have told me they've been told to shut the f up. I've had stuff on my Google Drive disappear. So
Man.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of things that are becoming more open to talk about, one of those is UFOs. I believe it all started in 2017 after the New York Times article, but there's been a lot of disinformation, a lot of misinformation come out since then, and this has become something that I think very little people actually know what is really going on here. And I'm not even sure our own government knows what's going on. I do have the belief that a lot of what they're showing us and a lot of what we see in the sky is already ours. It's already our technology. But beyond that, I think there's a lot that we don't understand and a lot about this phenomenon that is being manufactured and put out there to confuse the public. What is your whole idea of what's going on right now with the UFO phenomenon?
I think a lot of it is not necessarily um, misinformation. I think a lot of what's going on is like the old what do you call it? Like when you put the ball under the cup and you're switching them around,
Yeah,
and you got to find which where the
switcheroo.
ball's at. I
Yeah.
think that's what's going on. I think I'm glad they released a Tic Tac video. You know, uh, I think that was a genuine UAP is what they call them now, right?
Hmm.
Uh, an encounter just by the sound of the pilots' voices. They were very excited, to see it. But I think they probably have a lot more video, better video than that. They probably
Hmm.
have their hands on technology, but they're kind of breadcrumbing us for the moment. And at first, I'll tell you this much too. I was kind of like, why don't they just come out and tell us, yeah, there's stuff going on. It's not from this planet. We don't have any control over it. Um, I think, yeah, number one, they don't want people to panic because they don't have control over it. And number two, and I always say this jokingly, but I also mean it. You saw how we acted with toilet paper. You saw how we
Yeah.
just bought up all the damn toilet paper and how crazy we got. So there was a point I was like, you know what? I almost don't blame the government for not telling us stuff.
Why they're coming out now to talk about this stuff is very interesting, the timing and everything. Do you think that it's because they know something is going to happen? They know something inevitable. Are we going to find out about something? Or is it maybe they do have reverse engineered craft and they want to integrate it into the Space Force and things like that? So maybe that's a good excuse to show us this stuff.
Yeah, I think number one is that we're definitely going to find out. You know, there's so many leaks in the government. There's so many leaks, with these special programs um, that have come out and are continuing to come out. Uh, there's so many credible sightings, and there's actually some pretty good videos that you can't deny. And I think that's part of why they're just going to come out. And like you said, they're probably are planning on reverse engineering if they haven't already, and uh, for our own use. I think other governments around the world probably have their hands on some technology, and it would only make sense for us to do it too.
Now,
Um,
to what extent do you think we're involved on a clandestine level or on a military scale with extraterrestrials? We've all heard the stories of the deals made with Eisenhower and all the reverse engineered technology at Area 51, and that we actually have relationships with some of these beings. Do you think any of that is true?
Man, I would love it for it to be true, right? I would love for it to be true. Um, I think part of it's true. To what extent, I don't know, but I think there's a pretty good chance that our government has had contact, with aliens. I think I, I, I almost don't even doubt in my mind that we've had our hands on technology that they've probably given us. They're probably breadcrumbing the government also. They're not going to just hand over their best stuff. But I think our government knows about it, and there's probably different reasons why they don't just come out and say it. But like I said, the way we act sometimes there's probably a good reason for that too.
Well, the government is definitely portraying it as a threat, and a lot of the players involved at high levels are portraying it as a threat. I'm not so sure. I think they probably would have blown us to pieces a long time ago, or enslaved us a long time ago if that's what they wanted. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that this is something we should be worried about or concerned about?
No, like you, I think if they wanted to do us any harm, they would have done it a long time ago. We can't even keep up with their technology. So they'd
Hmm.
probably have no problem wiping us out. It's not like a Hollywood movie where we all going to band together and defeat them. They would probably wipe us out pretty quick.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think is actually happening with the abduction phenomenon? We had plenty of strange accounts where people are either reporting medical experiments, implants, seeing their hybrid children, being taken on craft and given profound information about the future. It's a mix of terrifying accounts and accounts where it's just nothing but light and love and wonderful experiences. But there is never any evidence that we can look at that this is actually happening as far as physical evidence. Now, I know that the contactees and the people involved, they truly, most of them that I've spoken with at least, believe their story. And I believe that something happened to them. But as far as what is actually going on, are people being taken and from their beds? Are they physically being taken? There's a lot of speculation that this is happening on a consciousness level or in a different type of astral realm. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think for the most part, it is something that's being done on a consciousness level. I think I think there are abductions. I think they do take our DNA, whether it's to help their species or even seed other planets. I think that's a possibility too. That they're just to some degree a farmer.
Mm.
There's planets they want to habitualize whatever habituate. I don't know how that word is, but I think there's planets they want to put life on it, and you know I think I've heard stories of people who have um, consciously seen their clones on other planets. Um, so I think that's part of what they do, not just abduction for medical purposes. I think they are using our DNA.
Do you think that we're entering an era where pretty soon it's going to be accepted and known on a large scale that these beings exist and it's just going to be a part of our lives? Do you think people will actually be ready to hear this?
Maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually, yeah, yeah. I think they'll either make themselves known, or the government will have to just come forward and say, okay, these creatures are here, these beings are here, and they come and go as they please, and you know, it is what it is at that point. I don't, and like I said, I don't think it's going to be anything, bad for us, I think it'll be all positive.
All right. Well, we're definitely entering interesting times with everything that's happening with the Pentagon departments and what they're looking at. So, I like to keep an eye on it. I do want to get back to the Bigfoot and kind of missing 411 aspect to it. In Texas, do a lot of people go missing under strange circumstances?
Yes, there's actually an area, and it's known for the missing 40. Uh, it's an area where 40 people have gone missing under strange circumstances. Um, it is a heavily wooded area. It's in East Texas, and it's not that far out of Houston, maybe an hour and a half outside of Houston. Um, it's a small corridor um, where 40 people have gone missing, and they've just like vanished out of thin air. Find their cars parked on the side of the road. They broke down for whatever reason, and they're just never seen from or heard of again. And it's over the span of I think 20 years. That they've come up missing and have never been found, which is kind of strange. Considering that there are a lot of hunters here in Texas, and They cover a lot of ground, and especially in that part of East Texas, where just like I said, it's heavily wooded, but it's also a very heavily hunted area.
Right. Are there any stories surrounding missing people that maybe have been found later and report strange circumstances about about them going missing?
Not regarding Bigfoot. There are UFO cases, of course, but regarding Bigfoot, no. Um, I thought there was a story about a little boy that got lost here, but it wasn't here. It was somewhere else. I'm thinking about it, but yeah, no one's ever gotten lost and come back and claimed something Bigfoot related or any kind of cryptid related.
Right. Now, do you think that the Bigfoots are mainly a benevolent creature that just want to do their own thing, that are territorial if we come around, and not necessarily want to harm humans?
I think I think they will hunt humans. I think we're pretty much easy prey. You know,
Really?
if
Okay.
I do think that we're on the menu to some degree.
Uh,
We might not be exclusively on the menu because most predators don't hunt other predators. I think they know that we can be dangerous. But I do think that if there's an opportunity, that they will take it. People think of dolphins as these cute little creatures that swim around in the sea and are friendly to humans, but there are also several dolphin attacks every year too. Dolphins will attack people. You know, um, there are people who have dogs that are the nicest dogs in the world, but they will still bite someone from time to time.
mm.
So that doesn't make them evil or necessarily bad.
But do you think there's different degrees of consciousness levels or intelligence with these beings, like we were talking about earlier? Some that may be more primitive might be more aggressive, or you might have to worry about them a little bit more, and some might be closer to the human race as far as evolution and thought process and things like that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think there are some that probably have a higher intelligence and uh, are a little bit more aware, I guess you could say, if that makes sense. They're just a
Yeah.
little bit more aware of who we are in relation to them. They probably don't see us as much as they probably don't see a big difference in us. If that makes sense. So we're probably on, at least they think of us as the same being, maybe. Uh, if you want to call it human or um, I think for the most part there are those that think of us as the same.
Yeah. Now, how often are you going on investigations, or are you going out in the woods and looking for these things?
I stay out of the woods in the winter in the summertime because it's just too doggone hot and there's
Yeah.
mosquitoes and ticks and snakes and uh, but like here starting in October I'll go out at least twice a month when it's in the cooler weather. So in October, as a matter of fact, I think it's like October the 15th is my next trip uh, out there. So I'll go out at least twice a month, all fall and winter long.
Now, are you primarily just using like sound equipment and video and things like that, or do you have any other techniques or methods that you're applying?
Yeah, so we have. I say, it's me, Walter, and a couple other guys. We all have game cameras and trail cams, and we set up in different locations, including the location where he had his encounter. Um, we set up our recorders, but we also set up like those glow sticks. We set them around the game cameras. Um, we try to act like normal campers. We don't do hoots and howls and wood knocks. That's just my preference. First of all, I couldn't probably howl if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Um, some people are pretty good at it. They really are. So
Mm.
it's just something I don't do. Um, but yeah, we have a lot of recording equipment. Whether it be audio or the trail cams. And like I said, I like to use those the glow sticks, and I hang them up. Hopefully they'll get attracted to it because I've heard people talk about that they'll come and mess around with it.
Huh.
We're kind of iffy on leaving like food, like peanut butter and apples, just because other animals can come and grab that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, right on, man. Well, this is awesome. I love the research you're doing. Tell us, before you head out, tell us about the podcast and what's going on with that.
Yeah, man. I have a podcast of my own. It's called Beyond the Woodline. It's on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Anchor. But we talk about everything, whether it be Bigfoot, paranormal, UFOs, remote viewing. I have psychic mediums on there, witchcraft. If it's a strange phenomenon or something weird, I definitely love to talk about it and just kind of get knowledge out there to people, or, and just try to spread some good stuff about this subject.
Yeah, man, I love it. All right. Well, before you head out, let the audience know where they can find you, if you have a website, social media, all the good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me at Joe DeHoyos, just like my name on the screen, or I'm on Facebook at Beyond the Woodline. And yeah, just type me in. And man, you've got anything strange you want to talk about, hit me up. You can email me at beyond.woodline@gmail.com.
Perfect. Well, Joe, this was great, and I'd love to definitely talk with you again in the future.
Yeah, man, me too. I love to have you on my show, dude.
Hey, anytime. Just let me know.
Yeah.
All right. Till next time, everyone, have an excellent evening. We'll talk again tomorrow. We'll see y'all
Thanks,
then.
guys. Have a good night, guys.
Did you know that your body and well-being are being continuously threatened by something you don't even see? That threat is based on electromagnetic radiation, or e-smog. On an average day, you get exposed to 20 to 40 sources of negative EMF, such as your Wi-Fi router, Bluetooth headphones, cell towers, even the dirty electricity hidden in your walls. This radiation creates a long list of problems that impact your everyday wellness and well-being. Check out the Centropix bubble. The bubble is a breakthrough miniature active neutralizing frequency device that literally fits in your pocket. The bubble uses EMF radiation protection, which makes positive electromagnetic frequencies that are aligned with your body and the earth. The bubble is programmed and charged by impulses from a specifically developed bioresonance radiation technique. Frequencies that counter interference fields, known as electrosmog or electromagnetic pollution, are recorded as information by the bubble. Best of all, you can take the bubble with you wherever you go. Rediscover the joy and wonderful passion of being alive and reclaim your vitality and energy. Just go to getthefrequency.com or click the link in the description to get your Centropix bubble today. What can we do to fight back against Big Pharma and the compromised medical industry? We can become healthy and break free from the perpetual cycle of being poisoned by criminal organizations like most pharmaceutical companies. Come check out what may be the most powerful antioxidant known to man, C60 PurplePower. The benefits of C60 have been personally outstanding. I use it every day and I feel incredible. I have tons of energy, I sleep great, and I haven't even come down with a cold since I started using C60 over 2 years ago. You can even get C60 for your pets. Do your own research, click the link in the description, and check out their website. If you order from that link or use coupon code KNOWLEDGE10, you get 10% off your order plus free shipping. What is your health worth to you?